This is Betsy Jensen, and you are listening to Unstoppable Body and Mind, episode 44, Koshas, the layers of the body.
In this podcast, we learn to upgrade our brain and understand the power of our thoughts, to heal and to create the results we want in our life. Become the person in control of your healing and make peace with your life. Become unstoppable, body and mind.
Hello, my friends. Thank you all for joining me today. Thanks for listening, and perhaps you're watching on Instagram or YouTube. And I want to thank all of you who have been leaving ratings and reviews. They're so awesome. It helps this podcast be found by more people, and I really enjoy reading them. I've had some great reviews. I'm going to read one right now. This was from Toddler MD. What can I say? Finding Betsy and this podcast was an answer to prayers, and I have long prayed for help with exhaustion and pain. As a classically trained physician, this even makes perfect sense to me on a scientific level. I'm getting off some medications and some foods that I used for years to feel better. My weight is under control, and I feel like my endorphins have never been better. So, I know this podcast is changing lives. If you haven't taken the time to go to iTunes and rate and review it, click the link to go over to iTunes and leave this podcast a rating and review. So today I wanted to switch gears a little. I know a lot of times I talk about science and neuroscience, but I also like to incorporate and fuse together some of the other ancient wisdom, some of the other things that I've learned. And this concept I learned in yoga teacher training, and it has to do with the layers in the body called koshas. Now, again, this is more of a concept, a theory. It's not measured scientifically, but remember, science has its limitations. We can only measure the things that we can observe certain ways and quantify. And so I would encourage you to listen to this episode with an open mind if you tend to be more of a science-minded kind of person, and see if anything here resonates. See if you might find some wisdom in this ancient knowledge today, maybe a little piece of the puzzle that might have been missing for you. So yoga has been around for thousands of years, and yoga is not just the sun salutations and the practice of moving the body on a mat that you might think. There are actually 8 limbs of yoga, and the asana, or the movement practice that you might think of in a yoga class, is only one of the 8 limbs. Yoga is more of a lifestyle. Yoga means to join. So it is to join the individual consciousness with the universal higher consciousness. And one of the principles about the health and wellness of the body is the concept of koshas, or layers in the body. So just like onions and parfaits, humans have layers. And we have 5 layers that cover over the light that we have within us. All of us have the Atman, or the soul or spirit, or the self with a capital S. We have a part of us that's the same as the great source. So it's kind of like we each have a droplet of the ocean in us that's the same consistency as the ocean. And ultimately, we want to get back and unite with that ocean, or to know ourselves as complete and united with that ocean. Another way to think of the Atman is to think of a light that's within us, like a light bulb that's burning brightly. And then these koshas cover the layers on top of the light bulb that, if they're dense, will prevent the light from shining through. These layers are made of Maya, different forms of Maya, which means illusion. So if these layers are thick and dense, the light cannot shine out, and we are trapped in illusion. But the more transparent we can make these layers, the more it allows the light within us to shine through. It would be like a light bulb with layers of progressively denser fabric and then maybe a down comforter on top. You wouldn't be able to see the light shining through. But if the layers were made more and more transparent, like Saran Wrap, you could have all 5 layers on top, but still see the light that's shining through. And you may be able to think of examples of people in your life that when they walk into the room tend to light it up. It's like they're radiating light. And they shine so brightly that they can help other people realize the light within them. There might be people in your life that you can think of that make you feel more shiny. You kind of radiate, you kind of glow with them. Or maybe you just feel a little less heavy. This is a person who's created transparency and unity through all of these layers of the koshas. We'll start with the outermost of the 5 layers called the Annamaya kosha. It is the food layer. This is the part of the body that's fed and nourished by food. It represents physical structures of the body. So as a PT, this is kind of what I specialized in: muscles, tendons, bones, joints, ligaments, the neuromuscular system. And it could also include the skin and organs. So disease or ailment at this layer would show up with problems with these structures. And you could take certain foods or supplements in order to help with healing at this layer. But it's also important to remember that the problem could actually be starting from a deeper source and radiating outward. So it's always good to look at all of the levels, because there could be reverberations in the body from a deeper level, like throwing a rock in a pond and having it ripple outward. So I like to think of the people that I kept seeing and treating in physical therapy, where we were addressing a problem on the food layer of the body with a physical solution, but they weren't getting better because the root of that injury was actually at a deeper level. Remember, the goal of the koshas is to become more and more transparent at each level. So the food layer can become more transparent by the things that we ingest or put into our body, how we feed it. It could be what we eat or drink, how we treat the physical body, and also exercise for the body. You may be able to think of foods that make you feel lighter or make you feel denser or more heavy or thick. And they can change from person to person. One person's diet style may provide that lightness and energy, where to another person may feel dense and heavy. The goal is to constantly just be checking with the body and treating it from a place of love. You're not choosing what you're eating from a place of hating your body and wanting it to be different. You're choosing foods because you love your body and want it to be healthy. And the same with exercise. You're not exercising as a punishment for your disgusting body. You're moving because you love your body, because it feels good to stretch it and work the muscles sometimes, and maybe just dance in your living room. Listen to those cues from your body. Maybe you might feel like taking the stairs or jogging up them, or maybe going for a walk outside. Maybe just noticing how good it feels in your body to sit up taller and take a deeper breath. The asana practice, the yoga practice that you think of when you see people doing yoga in a class, can help with this food layer. But it primarily actually works on the second layer which is the pranamaya kosha, which is the pranic layer. Prana is the life force, so that could be considered the spirit, the soul, or the self with a capital S. So the yoga practice of moving and breathing primarily focuses on the life force energy of this layer. This layer is composed of the physiological structures of the body, like blood, lymph, the respiratory system, the circulatory system, and the endocrine system, like the thyroid. So if you have major conditions in any of these areas, your primary work may be here at the pranic level. So there are 2 main primary remedies to gain transparency at this level. One is the asana practice of yoga, which is the bending and twisting and stretching on the mat, which can promote flow and movement of this life force, getting things unstuck. And the other way is through the pranayama, which is the breath work in yoga. So maybe the asana practice, the movement on the mat, is not something that your body could tolerate right now. So finding different ways to work on breath work can create transparency and lightness in this area. Okay, so we have the food layer, the prana or life force layer, and the next layer is the monomaya kosha, which is the mind layer. And this is more the monkey mind, the irrational mind, the emotional mind. It's that mental chatter that can just be so dense that it's covering up your light on this layer. The ailments of the mind layer would be anxiety and depression. If this layer is very dense, meditation is actually not as helpful. Going into the mind, trying to quiet the mind, if the thoughts are very, very negative, can actually cause the person to spiral down more. So, the remedy, the way to feed and nourish this area is through devotional practices, keeping good company, so connection with others, and performing selfless service to others. So the karmic practices of caring for someone else. Also, bhakti yoga, which is chanting or singing, because you can't stay miserable when you're singing. Okay, so after the mind layer is the Vijnanamaya kosha, which is the knowledge layer. And this layer is different than the mind because it involves the wisdom, the intuition, and your perceptions. It's the layer where you can figure things out and plan and study. It represents the intellectual level of the mind. And the ailment of this layer is boredom. It's not being engaged, not enlightened by life. I think of the people who have a dream and they don't think they can pursue it, or they're too afraid. So they settle, they grow dense and stagnant and bored. So if this is you, the way to feed and nourish this layer is by studying and engaging in learning and growing. You find what is calling to you, what connects you, what gets you in the flow, what are you passionate about, how do you feel bliss. Now, remember, maybe you're feeling pain on that outer level, the food level of the body, but the source is actually from a deeper layer, like a ripple from a deeper source, or like a blockage that's upstream. And so the river down below only gets a little trickle. And until you fix that deeper layer, the outer layers will just keep showing up with problems. So this may actually be the layer that you work on primarily in solving your leg pain or your back pain. And remember, this layer is not just for studying. So if you tend to want to study things a lot before you take action, that may actually prevent you from achieving your dreams. If you think, I just need to study a little bit more. So be careful that you're not only studying, but also applying that knowledge. Consider your layer might be dense because you're not taking action, doing the things you need to connect and send your message out into the world. Meditation can be very helpful in this area. I love the quote, everyone should meditate 20 minutes a day. Unless you're busy, then you should meditate for an hour. I know the times in my life when I've made it a priority to meditate each day, then I do have more intuition. The knowledge comes a little bit more easily. Things seem to flow more and I'm not as stressed. So now as I meditate, I'm going to imagine that I'm creating transparency at this knowledge level. Okay, so the final innermost level is the Anandamaya kosha, which is the bliss layer. It represents the highest innermost self, that which is made of bliss. It's the deepest layer, the one closest to the true self, closest to that light bulb. So it is the layer that can cause the deepest affliction. The ailment in this layer is disconnection. Disconnection from others, from the self, or from source. Connection is crucial to human health and well-being. And our society seems to become more and more disconnected each year, especially with 2020. That's brought its own challenges with connection. But even if it is on a Zoom call or phone call or text, connecting with someone else is good for our mental health and well-being. People with stronger connections live longer and report a higher satisfaction of life. This layer is fed and nourished by devotional practices and by maintaining a connection with a higher power, whatever that is for you. So the way I teach to work on this layer is to become embodied, to connect with the body, the self, and to connect to that higher wisdom, that higher power. I encourage people to check in with their bodies frequently and to tune into the signals that their body is giving them as kind of signs from that inner wisdom. Learning to sense these signals in your body can be the best way to clue you in that you might be getting a little dense, a little thick, a little heavy, that you could use some lightness in some of these layers. So reflect back on this episode. Did anything jump out at you? Did anything catch your attention? Or maybe you heard it in a new way? I love this concept because I like to think of the deeper levels of what's going on and maybe ways to solve them that aren't the traditional ways that we've thought of, but have stood the test of time. If you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, Body and Mind Life Coach, or you can email me info@bodyandmindlifecoach.com. All right, see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned a little bit about your brain today that helps you in your life like it helped me. Please be sure and subscribe and leave a review. And of course, be sure and share this podcast with someone you know that wants an unstoppable body and mind.